Today's video, we're going to replace the brake pads on a 2003 VTX Honda 1800. This can be a relatively expensive job. The pads for this particular bike, for the front and rear, in Canada here cost about $300. First thing we're going to do is loosen off the Phillips head screws here on our brake fluid reservoir, just to release the pressure on the system. We'll take this cap off, and when we force the pads back into the rotors, that will force some fluid, and we don't want to put too much pressure on the system, so we'll remove this cover here. So the next step, we want to get a large flathead screwdriver, place it in between the brake pad and the rotor, and pry that rotor back, or sorry, pry that brake pad back. Hopefully you can see that, that's releasing there now. We don't want to damage the rotor, so just very carefully apply the pressure. I can feel that pad moving back there now. So that'll make it a lot easier to get those new thicker pads in place when we get the caliper off. So there's a rubber stopper here. Remove that. That'll give us access to our caliper slider pin in there. For that we need a 5mm Allen type wrench. You stick your 5mm socket in there, put your ratchet on it. You want to go obviously counterclockwise, lefty loosey. Don't apply, you shouldn't have to apply a whole lot of pressure to get that off of there. And there it goes. So we'll loosen that off. Now we have two 12mm bolts holding our caliper on there. Again, counterclockwise. I'll move my camera here a little bit. There's the one up at the top. And we'll remove those. So now that we know that our caliper mounting bolts are loosened off no problem, both of them are nice and loose, we're not going to run into any issues there. Finish taking this slider pin out here. There's a fair amount of thread on that slider pin. Eventually you get that out, and as we can see, the pads will fall right out. So we can see the pistons are driven fully back into the caliper here from when we used our screwdriver or flathead screwdriver to pry those back. And we're just going to give a spray of brake cleaner here. And incidentally, to get the caliper off over the rotor, we actually had to take the brake lines outside of this support here. So we had to move the brake lines out in front of that, and then the caliper slid off the rotor. So here's our caliper all cleaned up. I'll put our brake pad into place. We got our spring clip right there. Fit the end of the brake pad up into that clip. Take the other one. Notice there's a hole in these pads for that caliper slider pin to go through. Make sure that both of the pads are into the spring clip up here at the top. Get those into place. Take your slider pin, which we cleaned up, and put a little bit of brake grease onto. Don't use anything other than brake grease for these. You don't want to use any penetrating oil or anything like that, because the brakes get so hot. So slide the pin. You see that? How that goes through those holes in the bottom of the pads there. Now they're in place because the spring clip up here is keeping them in the correct position. I'll move them apart a little bit so that we can slide that over the rotor. Okay, so we had a slight change of plans here. I could not get this caliper over the rotor with the pads in place. So what we did was remove the pads, put our bolt, our caliper mounting bolt, just threaded it loosely into place there. You can see it's still loose. Took the pads out, and then it was able to obviously slide nice and easy over the rotor. And then we put the pads into place, and you got to verify that they're into place, because when you put them in from down below here, what you can do is you can press on the pad and you'll be able to feel it in the spring clip up above. It'll spring back on it. There'll be pressure. So as I say, got the caliper into place, put the pads into place down here, and then put the slider pin. You can see the slider pin is right there, and we can tighten that up right now, that slider pin, like so. So at this point everything is back in position. We have our two caliper mounting bolts here. They have to be torqued to about 20 pounds. That's not a whole lot of pressure, don't over torque these. And 13 pounds on our caliper slider bolt there. So at this point we did the right hand side brake pads on the bike. Left hand side is basically the exact same procedure, so you would want to replace those obviously. Now we loosened off our reservoir, tightened that back up, and a very important point to remember here is you don't want to move this bike until you've pumped your brakes and got your pressure back. So pump your brakes a bunch of times to set those brake pads against the rotor, and make sure you have your braking power back before you actually ride the bike. Okay, I just want to mention we're actually doing the other side of the brake here, and I just wanted to show, if you see this pin here that my finger is on, and up above here, this unit just slides on there, and it's worth cleaning these up too. Put some brake grease on these. So this unit here just pulls right out, and you can lubricate these pins with the brake grease. And that's what the unit looks like separated right there.